Hi, everyone. Welcome to week 13 of Coping with COVID, our financial support group. This is going to be a good week. I have some really good news to share about the new easy PPP Forgiveness application, which is really exciting. And I think as we keep processing this, I think you'll be pleased with how everything is coming together. I know that has taken up a lot of brain space for all of you lately. So today is June 22nd of 2020, and we've got some good things to share. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Elaine. It's nice to see you. And as you have probably heard me say, I am super lucky because I get to work with so many amazing organizations all around the country, helping creative individuals with the business side of their creativity. Everything we're talking about, per usual, is educational in nature and not intended to be tax, legal, or accounting advice. And as you know, the rules here are changing pretty regularly. So definitely make sure you are getting the most up-to-date information possible. So what are we doing? We're going to answer one, maybe two unemployment questions, and then spend a lot of time going over the new PPP Forgiveness application, and then answering a couple of other questions that came in this week. So one person submitted a question that they applied for unemployment in Michigan, and they've been submitting all of their weekly vouchers and they're all good to go. But in 1 week, they earned $5,000. And so that, of course, disqualified them for receiving unemployment, either through regular unemployment or pandemic unemployment assistance for that week. Here's the thing. If you're not also getting any form of unemployment, you're also losing out on that $600 additional federal emergency unemployment compensation payment. So that means if you do not qualify for unemployment because you made too much money in a given week, you also do not qualify for that extra $600. So to answer this person's question, yes, that is correct. If you do not qualify for unemployment in a given week because you earned too much, that means you also do not qualify for that extra $600. So people are sort of weighing options here. For many individuals, it's a better choice to go ahead and accept the compensation because generally speaking, that's probably more than you're getting from unemployment. Certainly unemployment in Michigan plus your $600 might be less than that $5,000 amount. And that $5,000 amount enables you to continue doing what you love to do and engaging with your clients in your community. I will remind you, though, that extra federal emergency unemployment $600 piece, that ends at the end of July. So for some people, depending on the timing of when these projects are falling into your lap or when you're pursuing them, if you are earning the money after the end of July, then you would be losing out on your unemployment, but you wouldn't necessarily be losing out on that extra $600 because that is scheduled to end the last week in July anyway. I will tell you there's chatter in Congress about extending that extra $600 per week payment. I don't know if that's going to happen or not, depending on who you're listening to and who is sharing his, her, their thoughts on any given day. Who knows what might happen, but just file away that extra $600 right now is scheduled to end at the end of July, even though there is chatter about extending it. So last week, we talked about the PPP Forgiveness application and the calculator tool that the AICPA has shared. I have good news for you, especially if you opened that Excel calculator tool and it made your eyes cross and you hated your computer for a moment. There is now an easier form. And I should say there are two easier forms. The first form, the regular PPP forgiveness application, was revised last week to reflect the passage of the CARES Flexibility Act, or the PPP Flexibility Act. That's the one we talked about a couple of weeks ago that allowed you to extend the covered period and change the payroll requirements of the PPP program, right? So that flexibility has now been incorporated into this new application for forgiveness. So that's good news. But it gets even better because for many of you who are sole proprietors without any employees, there is a new easy form. The IRS loves easy to indicate it is a slightly easier version of the form. That's what we've done here, or the Treasury Department has done here. So Form 3508 EZ is the loan forgiveness application for the PPP program. And this is a streamlined, easier version of the form to complete, which is really good news. I've included a screenshot of this form on your slide here and also a link to this. And the instructions for this form are magical. I love them. They give us a whole lot of really good information, and there's some good news embedded in there as well. So you can use this form if you are a self-employed individual, independent contractor, sole proprietor, single member LLC counts in here, who had no employees at the time of your PPP application, right? That's good. That applies to most of you. If you did have employees, you may still meet one of the other checkbox requirements that allows you to use this easy form, which is really, really good news. As you're going through this form, you'll very clearly enter all of the information. It's basically all contained on one page, and it's so much easier than going back and forth to all the different worksheets and schedules. My thought and idea is that we'll use our time together on Monday, July 6th, maybe to complete this form together so that we can walk through each part of the application. One question that came in, it was sort of a clarifying question. This person asked, it seems like health insurance premiums for sole proprietors are not forgivable. And that is correct. If you are the owner of the business, you cannot include your own health insurance premiums as part of your payroll or your forgiveness application. That is confirmed in the instructions to this forgiveness application. In fact, it says, I'll go ahead and read it to you just so you can hear all the fun verbiage for yourself. It says, do not add employer health insurance contributions made on behalf of a self-employed individual. That's you. Sorry about that. So yeah, your own health insurance premiums as someone who is self-employed, that is not included in your payroll. Now, if you have employees, it's a different story, but you probably already knew that. Another great clarifying question that came via email this week was, are rent expenses toward a home office, including utilities, internet, as claimed on 2019 Schedule C, forgivable? I also love this question because we've heard a little bit of conflicting guidance and there's a lot of confusion around this. My read is that yes, they are forgivable, and here's why. As part of the Federal Register, there is the SBA came out with some guidance last week. Let's see, this is dated Friday, June 19th. So it's practically hot off the presses for you. And this is called Business Loan Program Temporary Changes, PPP, Revisions to the Third and Sixth Interim Final Rules. If you've been listening along for a couple of weeks, you've heard me talk about these interim final rules and these guidelines that the SBA has been issuing. Here's a new updated version, the update to the third and the sixth one, which is super exciting if you are a tax or accounting or legal geek, but very hard to read if, for example, you studied English literature or creative writing. So I apologize for that, but there's good stuff in here. Specifically, there's a part in talking about what is forgivable that says payments of interest on mortgage obligations on real or personal property incurred before February 15th, 2020, to the extent they are deductible on Form 1040 Schedule C, and then it has in parentheses, business mortgage payments. So that to me says your business mortgage payments for your home office, if they are deductible on Schedule C, can count toward this forgiveness, which I think is very good news. Here's why it gets a little confusing. Remember, if you are a human that owns property, your interest payment on your mortgage on that real property could be deductible in one of two spots on your tax form. So it could be deductible on Schedule A. That's where you itemize your deductions. If it's deductible there, and that's where you claimed it in 2019, you cannot count it as part of your forgiveness application. It's only if you deducted it not on Schedule A, but if you deducted a portion of it on Schedule C for your business. Now, it's possible that you did both. Maybe you were someone who itemizes your deductions, so you took the business portion of the interest on Schedule C and then the personal portion on Schedule A. Or maybe you're someone who does not itemize, so you took the standard deduction in personal tax world and the business interest on your mortgage on Schedule C. In either of those cases, you're probably going to be okay because the mortgage interest for your real property was deductible on Schedule C, which means you can then use it as part of your calculation of forgivable PPP loan. So that's my read on it. Again, it's very possible that we will get new guidance that clarifies this one way or the other, but I think you have a solid argument that if you deducted your business interest on Schedule C, even for your home office, then you're good to go. And then, of course, utilities, internet, those sorts of things. If they were for your home, they were part of that home mortgage deduction on Schedule C. Or if you rented separate business property, like a studio space or an office, you would have claimed those deductions on the utilities line. So in either case, that can be part of your forgiveness application because your PPP money had to be spent on payroll, or on mortgage interest for your business property, or on utilities or rent for your business property. So that's why we're sort of getting into the weeds here. Here's the TLDR version, or what I would suggest that you do. Look at your own tax form from last year. And if you had on Schedule C, home mortgage deduction or office deduction or business rent or utilities, you can use all of those for your forgiveness, assuming you still had all of those expenses during your covered period. And speaking of the covered period, one thing that the Flexibility Act did is it allows individuals to choose a 24-week covered period instead of an 8-week covered period, which is good. That means you can include more expenses in that covered period to help you expend all of your funds on what you are allowed to spend them on so that that can be forgivable. Now, originally, when the first layer of guidance came out, it still capped payments to owners at 8 weeks worth of compensation or average compensation based on your 2019 Schedule C. So remember, that's that 8-week calculation that was throwing people off because the application was based on a monthly average income amount times 2.5 months. So there was a mismatch there, right? The final guidance, including this final register 3rd, 6th rule update, interim final rule guidance that came out, confirms that if you are the sole owner, you may use 2.5 months over 12 months for your own compensation to yourself, as long as you choose that 24-week covered period. I'm going to say that again slowly, or pause and rewind the video to listen to it again. If you received PPP funding and you choose the 24-week covered period, then you may pay yourself 2.5 months out of 12 months as your maximum compensation as the owner. Now, it still has to be less than what works out to be $100,000 a year, but for most of the individuals who are running their own creative businesses that we've been dealing with, that's not a sort of limit that you're worried about. We were much more worried about the 8 weeks versus the 2.5 months limitation. Now, if you choose the 24-week covered period, you can pay yourself a little bit more and have it be forgivable, which is really, really good news. So my suggestion would be go ahead and choose that 24-week covered period if you are someone who is planning to have most of this PPP money go to your own payroll, right? So if you want to pay yourself more than the average weekly amount for 8 weeks, that's okay, as long as you choose that 24-week covered period. If you choose the 8-week covered period, you are still capped at the average weekly amount for 8 weeks over 52 weeks, right? So if you choose 8 weeks as your covered period, you're still in the same boat you were a couple weeks ago, right? With that 8 over 52 limitation for what you can pay yourself. If you choose 24 weeks of a covered period, which means you can't apply for forgiveness until your covered period ends, right? So now we're looking at maybe 6 months instead of 2 months for that covered period, but you get to have more of your compensation to yourself forgivable, which could be a really good move for a lot of you. Okay, I will pause. I'm sure there are extra questions about that. If there are extra questions, send them my way. As I mentioned, I really like the idea of using our weekly time together on July 6th, that Monday at 3 o'clock Eastern, to go through different aspects of this application, because by then there might be even more guidance. And at that point, the 8 weeks will have ended and it'll be a good time to go ahead and start gathering your information. So that would be my suggestion. But definitely send the questions to me if you have additional questions, and we'll make sure to answer them. Okay, I'm switching gears slightly on you, away from PPP forgiveness, kind of. Another question that came in is about the EIDL advance amount. This person received an EIDL advance, and they know the advance amount will be subtracted from whatever's forgivable for PPP purposes, which is right. And the EIDL was actually an application for a loan, and the EIDL loan doesn't have any forgiveness associated with it, but it came with this advance that is treated as a grant. Now, if you accept the loan, right, I've seen conflicting guidance. What I think would be the best approach is to assume that the grant that you received, that advance amount, will be rolled into the loan that you then have to pay back. However, if you receive your loan offer and you say, never mind, no thank you, all the guidance I've been reading says you do not have to pay back that advance. You still get to keep that advance, which is treated as a grant. Now, that does reduce the amount of your PPP loan that's forgivable, but that's okay. It's sort of like, which pocket are you going to take it from, right? So that could be a really good option for you. So file that away. If you already received your EIDL advance, treat it as a grant and know that it will reduce your PPP forgivable amount. And if you decide not to accept the EIDL loan, which you are free to do, you can decline it, then you do not have to pay back the advance. Now, someone else asked if they're thinking about doing this EIDL program right now, is that okay? This person is applying for an EIDL loan, which again is a loan. It's a loan through the SBA. And when you apply for that loan, you get an additional grant. I will say this program early on ran out of money pretty quickly. There have now been new dollars appropriated to it, but they will probably also go quickly as well. So if you were thinking about this and then you didn't get it, and maybe you're still thinking about it, this could be something that makes sense for you to explore. This person, though, is in that situation. They're thinking about applying for this, but they're having trouble with the business activity codes because none of them really seem to make sense for individual artists. The sort of broad category has an option for entertainment, but then a more detailed option under entertainment doesn't really fit for individual artists. So here's my read of it. And the article that reintroduces or talks about the extra funding to the program is from Forbes. I've linked that on the slide. And within that article, it links you to the application through the SBA's website. So you can kind of see what this looks like. Basically, the business activity code tends to be what is reported on your Schedule C. That's in that box B that's way up at the top of your Schedule C. And for many individual artists, the code they use is 711510. That's the code for independent artists, writers, and performers, which is sort of delightfully broad. Now, for purposes of the NAICS code, which is what's on your Schedule C, that does fall under this entertainment category, although I think they call it arts, entertainment, and recreation. So part of me thinks that's a good spot to start because it feels really closely aligned with what is on your Schedule C, probably. However, there's also another miscellaneous category, and if you think that feels like a better fit, that might be a better option for you. And you can choose miscellaneous, and then under the more specific drop down, there's an option for other service/retail miscellaneous services. So it's really kind of up to you. I would say though, take a peek at your Schedule C, see what your business activity code is, and then see if you can make your best guess based on that. The business activity codes used on Schedule C are all listed out in the Schedule C instructions. The instructions are about 18 pages long, and those last 2 pages are where all of these codes are listed. So that's maybe not a bad place to start, just to kind of educate yourself so that you can choose the best category. So that would be my suggestion. Look at your own Schedule C, see what it says. And generally, entertainment with that gallery choice might be the best option, even though that's not exactly what you do, or that miscellaneous and then other option could make sense as well. In any case, though, as you're going through this application, make the best choice that you can. Remember or write down or document why you made that choice. And then when you speak to someone at the SBA, which will happen before the loan closes, right? Then you can confirm with them that you made the choice that definitely makes sense for you. Okay, the last question I wanted to circle back on. Last week, someone had asked about self-employment income and Social Security. I did some digging just to reconfirm that my understanding was correct, and found on the SBA's website, or sorry, on the SSA's website, the Social Security Administration, that your self-employment tax payments to the IRS do count towards Social Security. However, you still have to meet that work credit requirement to be eligible for Social Security. And so if you are someone who is running a business and maybe it also has a lot of expenses, your net earnings amount might be kind of low. So it might take you longer to get to that work credit limit than it would take someone who has a W-2 job with an employer, right? I found some resources that you might find helpful as well. There is a blog entry on the Social Security Administration's website about how Social Security works when you are self-employed. And then there's also a publication with some of the same language as in the blog post that is posted on the Social Security Administration's website. So I've linked both of those on the slide if you'd like to check them out. I'll also note as well, if you maybe have a year as someone who's self-employed where you didn't necessarily make a whole lot of money, which means you may not earn the work credits you need for the year to count towards Social Security, there is an option to do this optional reporting method. And as someone who is not a farmer, you may choose this optional method in up to 5 years. So if you have a year where you're earning on a net basis less than $400 from your business, you may want to think about this optional reporting method for that particular year. And that's a choice you can make up to 5 times during your life as you are accumulating the work credits you need to be eligible to claim Social Security when you retire. So I hope that's helpful. We had so many great questions this week. Thank you. Keep them coming for sure via email or in the chat when we are having these sessions live because they do make for a very engaging, interesting conversation, and I appreciate them. So today we talked about how if you are not eligible for unemployment because you make too much in a particular week, you also do not get that extra $600. And then we talked about the streamlined PPP forgiveness application and then the even better easy application for PPP forgiveness, along with some updates to the interim final rule that answers some specific questions that could be helpful. So remember, if you are someone who received PPP funding, you probably want to think about that 24-week covered period so that the amount you can pay yourself is increased to that 2.5 months out of 12 average that you used when you filled out the application. So it took a long time to get to what I think is probably the right end result, but I'm very glad we got there, and I hope you are happy about that as well. If you have any other questions, feel free to send them to me. Thanks again for continuing to hang out and have these conversations on a weekly basis. We'll be back next week towards the end of June at 3 o'clock Eastern for a live Q&A session where we'll go through all of your questions. And then for the first Monday in July, that's Monday, July 6th, I think we'll use that day to go through this easy PPP forgiveness application. So that'll be a really good time to bring some specific questions if you have any of them. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of your week, and I will look forward to seeing you all again next Monday.